On September the 1st, 1939, German forces invaded Poland. And we know the rest. What were the times like as Europe slid into war? How is the war seen now? Is it still the Great Crusade? If there's anything that's more apt for our programme title, it's this. So join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
A gun salvo of the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein shelling Poland's Westerplatte munitions depot on September 1st, 1939, and the bombing of the Polish town of Wieluń heralded the dawn of what came to be the deadliest modern-era armed conflict that consumed the lives of 80 million people, the Second World War. Deeply rooted in racial biases, pseudoscience and occultism, Adolf Hitler's Nazi ideology gave birth to the Holocaust. Based on the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem's Institute's estimates, between 5.6 million and 6.2 million Jews died in the Holocaust, approximately 60% of their pre-World War II population. The war was preceded by the Third Reich's Anschluss of Austria in March 1938, followed by the occupation of Czechoslovakia, and the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a treacherous non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, with a secret protocol establishing Poland's and the Baltic states' partition by the USSR and Germany. The protocol was enacted on September 17th, when the Red Army backstabbed Poland while it was striving to repel the Nazi German onslaught from the west. Adolf Hitler had a handful of fabricated pretexts to serve as his casus belli. Those included a series of provocations at the Polish-German border, including a false flag attack on the radio station Sender Gliwice in what is now Gliwice, Poland, on August 31st, 1939, which came to be known as the Gliwice Incident. Poland will commemorate the 85th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II this Sunday, with the largest commemorative activities scheduled to take place in the northern city of Gdańsk. But the bulk of commemorative activities is set to take place on Sunday around the Westerplatte monument at 4:45 a.m. Poland's defense minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz is among those scheduled to deliver a speech. Germany's responsibility for initiating World War II and the crimes it committed against Poland and its citizens have long been an unmended wound in the Polish-German relations. But over the past years, more and more attempts at reconciliation have been made. Notably, when commemorating the 80th anniversary of the outbreak of World War II, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Polish World War II veterans, heads of states and Polish citizens gathered in Warsaw, offered humble words of apology for the crimes committed by Germans during the horrid armed conflict.
Our guest joining us today is Alina Nowobilska, the Polish historian based here in Warsaw. Welcome once more to the programme.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm enjoying our chats, really.
So am I. Great to have you. 1st of September 1939. That's the fateful date etched in Polish memory. But if we go back a bit, can you give us an outline, a taste of the times of the 1930s? Not just in Poland, but in Europe generally.
Well, if we start with Poland, let's break this down a little bit. So Poland in the 1930s, it's been independent only for a few years, really. We're still trying to build a government correctly, still trying to build an economy. You know, you still have the threat of Russia from the east. You still have the threat from Germany. You know, we're not going to lie about that. There is still a threat from Germany. Poland's army, not the best. I got a tweet thrown at me that Poland was ready to fight a war. It wasn't. Poland's
propaganda.
It's total propaganda. Polish army it's weak with outdated equipment, but you know it does give it a good go on the 1st of September. Otherwise, Germany, for example, has gone through the Great Depression. Everybody is struggling. There's a lack of money, a lack of food. I mean, it costs thousands of Reichsmarks just to buy a loaf of bread. People are struggling for jobs, industries down, and the rise of Hitler gives some sort of hope to the people. And back when I was at university, I'm going to give a very, very quick anecdote here. When I was back at university, my university lecturer showed us Triumph of the Will, which is a programme done by Leni Riefenstahl, which shows this whole rise of Hitler, and it's one of the probably one of the best propaganda films ever created.
Yes, a brilliant film as well.
It is absolutely, and I would highly recommend people to go, but shut yourself off in a room in the dark and put yourself back into those times. To be honest, I think I probably would have voted for Hitler if I was in that position, to see this one man who is going to change the world. You know, he's attacking the Treaty of Versailles, which is taking land away from Germany, sorry, and it's given land to those peasants,
to redress the balance that was always owed to us as Germany.
Well, oh God, this is kind of a really difficult question. You're sending me down another rabbit hole. Stop it. Well, you know, after the Treaty of Versailles, Poland gained territory, Germany lost territory, Russia also lost territory but didn't gain territory. So you've got all of these borders are constantly moving. This becomes, again, another issue when we come down to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which we talked about, was about last week or so, like that. Russia, on the other hand, you've had a massive revolution. The Bolsheviks have now created a Soviet state. So they're pushing to try and get a revolution all the way through to Germany. So that's their most important thing, you know, get rid of these imperialists and these capitalists, and that's what we want. So Europe is not necessarily as stable. There's lots of pacts going on. So that's apparently what Roger Morehouse quotes, a thing of the time in the 1930s, that people were making pacts with each other, basically. So you've got pacts between Germany and Poland, Germany and England, France and gosh, I can't remember now. My brain's gone a bit frozen, but, you know, you've got pacts going left, right and centre. So
bilateral, trilateral.
Yes, you've even got a pact going between Italy, Japan and Germany. You know, we're bringing in people from outside of Europe as well, so.
And what, is this an inevitability of war, do you think? Or is it, does Europe slide into war? We've had the Spanish Civil War, 36 to 39. Is this a natural flow on from that in Europe? Is there a belief in countries like Poland that something's bound to happen, or do people still think we can get away with peace still?
God, there's so much happening in Europe at this time with possible war. And I mean, war, part of the reason is because Germany wanted land, territory, and to get rid of those pesky Poles. And the Soviets wanted to continue their Soviet Bolshevik revolution, really. But also there's war going on outside of Europe as well. So this is one thing, we become very Europe-centric. Sorry to bring this up, but we become very Europe-centric. You've got war happening with China and Japan in 1937. So it is kind of a continuation of war, instability. Germany's getting involved in the Spanish Civil War. It's a proxy war between Germany and the Soviet Union, which again, when it comes down to the Soviet Pact, is like, they're having wars, proxy wars, yet they're creating a pact together. So, yes and no.
Yes, the context is all here. Is there a sense that the war takes Poland by surprise, or is the Polish public reaction 1st of September 1939, is that one of disbelief or one of dogged resistance? How can you gauge that?
Both actually. Do you want to dive into the 1st of September?
Sure, yeah.
We can dive into the 1st of September. So if you look at it from two perspectives, you have the civilian perspective and you have the military perspective. So the military perspective, you've got Westerplatte, for example. The soldiers are ready. You've got the German ship that fires onto Westerplatte. The bunkers have already been dug pretty well in. So the Poles are pretty well protected, and the Germans land on Westerplatte and they're like, you know, the commando troops, sorry, I completely slipped my mind who they were. The commando troops land, they try to attack Polish positions. Poles are very well dug in and can shoot at the Germans very easily. So they are putting up a very big resistance. They're ready. From the other aspect, which we forget, because this is what we look at September 1939, is the military aspect. All the invasions, the blitzkrieg, how fast the German military moved through Poland, because they did. But we forget the civilian population. And for me, when I talk about the 1st of September, I bring up Wieluń.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
In the early hours of September 1939, Wieluń was bombed. Now, Wieluń had no strategic importance at all. Zero, nothing. There was no military. It was on the border, and it was just a beautiful old medieval, even pre-medieval little town. Now, it's a question to you. Do you know what the first target was bombed in Wieluń? The first target
was the square, wasn't it?
No.
Church?
It was a very clearly marked hospital.
Ah, okay.
With pregnant women, a lot of pregnant women, because everybody else is evacuated, but you can't, women who are about to give birth, you can't move them. So many young children, babies, days old, and pregnant women died in the bombing of Jelun.
This was essentially a target practice for the Luftwaffe.
And not just that, this is the pretext of what's to come. Because this is what it is, it's going to be full-blown terror. The occupation is going to be filled with absolute terror. And looking at this very innocent moment of people being murdered, that's it. That's what it's all going to look like.
Poland, it's probably fair to say that Poland entered a new dark age on that date.
Yes, and it was horrible. People, so many civilians lost their lives. I've got an amazing story actually linked to the Warsaw Uprising, because two sisters, two nurses, one dies in 1939. She was in a hospital, again, in Warsaw. Hospital gets bombed. There is everybody's getting bombed. Same as women when they said about the Warsaw Uprising. Everybody is target practice. People were in columns fleeing cities, and the German Luftwaffe were raining bullets down upon these people.
As we close our discussion, what's the historiography of specifically the Polish campaign like? We know Roger Morehouse, great historian, has written a superb book about it. Is that a one-off book about the campaign? We know much about the later 1940 campaign, German campaign in France and the Low Countries. Poland seems to be shunted off on the sideshow.
Oh yeah, totally. You just answered your own question now. The reason being is that even Roger Morehouse writes this in his book. Highly recommend, you want to know more about September campaign, go buy his book. But if you look at, for example, World War II by Anthony Beevor, how much does Poland get? Not even a chapter, 4 lines. And that's not me criticising Anthony Beevor, he's a fantastic historian. But look at all of these books that write about the first I don't know, weeks of the war. Poland gets a 2 lines, 3 lines. They talk about diplomacy. They talk about what's happening between England and France. Oh, and then maybe a little bit of Poland.
How do you account for that on the part of Western historians? Just forgetting about it.
We just do. They just don't care. Poland is being written out of history. It's also, that is another whole longer conversation. I think we could sit here and have a whole longer one about this, but it's also to do with the idea of communism, because Poland was wiped off history. We couldn't talk about our own history. We couldn't record our own documents. We couldn't record our own testimonies. And when we did, it was heavily scrutinised.
Yes, I mean, that was the legacy of the 17th of September, wasn't it?
Oh, that didn't exist.
Yes.
That never happened. Well, it did, obviously, but, yes, you know, in quotations.
They wrote that out, yes. What's the historiography of the Second World War in general? Do we as historians make the mistake that it was First World War and then the Second World War, but essentially it was one long war? Ooh. It started in 1914, wasn't it?
Oh, that is...
And 1939 was just a World War I, round 2.
Do you know what? There's quite a lot of historians that do believe that. I kind of believe in that a little bit, because there's so many things that lead up to Second World War, and you've got, what, a matter of 20 odd years between the two? It's such a small amount of time. And not just that, you mentioned obviously the Spanish Civil War. We have the war in Japan. In Japan, it began in 1937. So for them, the Second World War began way before 1939. So where do we pinpoint? I mean, if you want to write a book, you could probably spend writing 65 different volumes of where World War II began.
Where you were, yes.
But in all honesty, I believe it is sort of it's a continuation, and you could call it one giant war at the end of the day.
Do we see in Western historiography simply in terms of the rise of Hitler, or do we understand this gigantic battle between communism and Hitlerism, Nazism, that characterised the 1930s?
We forget Poland in the middle, as always. Every historiography will always forget Poland in the middle, and trying to find any books that you want to be able to quote or write about for Poland in this time period is non-existent. So all they do concentrate on, sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, all they do concentrate on is the rise of Hitler, and there are thousands of books on the rise of Hitler, absolutely thousands. You could literally throw a penny and hit one into a pile of books. And that's what people are mostly interested in. Communism, I guess that is on the rise now. slowly but surely, people are starting to get interested in the communist aspect, because again, communism, it just, to most people, just didn't exist. And if it did, then it existed in the 1950s and 60s when it was between the US and Russia. They don't think about communism in Eastern Europe, or Eastern Central Europe. They don't think about that. And they don't think about it in the 1930s either, because again, Hitler and the idea of Germany was far more important to people than the rise of Stalin.
A final question to you on the Polish issue, the Polish aspect. The war not only traumatised Poland, 6 million citizens killed, hundreds of thousands sent to every corner of the world. Is that exile of the Poles known and understood? We have Norman Davies writing about the Anders Army, the Trail of Hope. What about the contribution of Poland to this gigantic struggle? Is that forgotten as well, like the Polish position generally?
Oh, totally. People don't seem to realise what a gulag is. They don't seem to realise what people underwent and the kind of conditions that they went under. I mean, it's a bit, I don't really want to compare concentration camps and gulags, because you can't really compare, but the conditions in both were beyond horrific, and the goal of that was extermination at the end of the day. And people know what a concentration camp is, but they don't know what a gulag is. And if they do know what a gulag is, they seem to think that exile and gulags were only happening in 1939 and 1940. But the truth of the matter fact is, the Soviets and the Russians before that were doing this since the 18th century.
Yes.
And not just to their own, to everybody around them. You know, we know about Piłsudski, for example. He was exiled, his brother was exiled. And that wasn't in 1934, because Piłsudski was nearly on his deathbed by 1934, dies in 1935. But, you know, it's happening way before that. And it happens after 1939 and 1945 too.
Yes, and the thing about 1945 is Poland was the big loser of 1939, wasn't it? Battle of Britain pilots, the courageous pilots, and big parade at the end of the down the Mall in London, and no Polish presence at all. From heroes to
zeros,
zero.
Literally. Yes, it's my great-grandfather remembered when he was walking the streets in his Polish officer's uniform, and they spat at him, you know, thinking he's some sort of foreigner. And it's like, my great-grandfather actually worked with the American Army. He worked as a liaison, as a translator. He was what's the word of my? I've lost the word in my mind. Locked up in one of the camps in Spain, for example. He fought in the September campaign. He fought in Norway. You know, my great-grandfather did a lot, and what he gets is being spat at in the street, really.
All started in 1939, that terrible year. Thank you very much, Alina Nowobilska, for coming once more to our programme.
Thank you.
So that's all we have time for today. Join us next time for How We Got Here.